I suppose not everybody knows you.
Yeah.
So can you just give us the nutshell thing, where, how, what happened to you and why?
Okay, just involved with religion and Islam in particular, basically. All right, so I mean, I kind of grew up a fairly devout Muslim. I was a Shia Muslim. I kind of say that in my first video. And for years, I didn't want to really be one of those Muslims who were kind of Muslim by birth. I wanted to make sure and prove to myself that I wasn't just a random blind follower. And so I started getting into particular apologetics, and I started looking at some Muslim websites telling me why they think Islam is true and what evidence it has, etc. And in the end, I was convinced by two arguments more than any of the others. I was convinced by the scientific miracles argument, and I was convinced by the numerical miracle argument, if that's what you call it.
The 19?
The 19, yeah. Basically, there was a website called submission.org, and I got on that very early. Like, I got in that in my teens, and it had a bit of an impact on me. Like, I thought to myself, oh, hang on a second, what they're saying here does sound to be kind of legit. It does sound to be coming together. It does sound to be cohesive. Obviously, what this website does as well is it's not Orthodox Islam in any way. So they have a very kind of light version of Islam, which isn't Shia or Sunni. It's kind of very Quran based, rejects hadith. It claims that the last two verses of the 9th chapter were inserted by men and weren't divinely inspired.
The Rashid Khalifa argument.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of, it is the Rashid Khalifa group. And because they were the ones behind, Rashid Khalifa was the guy behind the number 19 and the whole kind of numerical miracle of the Quran. I was kind of, convinced to a degree that it was true, and I kind of was passionately Muslim for a while. I was a bit weird, I'd say. I like my bedroom door. I hung up a sign calling it a mosque, So I'd have a prayer mat constantly out on my carpet in my bedroom, and people thought I was weird when they come to visit the house. I don't know what the hell was going on in my mind, to be honest. I just wanted to kind of be like a really good Muslim. But obviously, there were questions that I never really answered properly. I kind of brushed to one side, never really bothered looking into properly. I was thinking, okay, well, as long as the scientific miracles pan out and the numerical miracle, as long as they're both legit, then I'm fine. And I kind of kept going with that. I tried to convince some of my friends and schoolmates and even teachers that Islam was the way. I remember lying actually once to do this, unfortunately, as we kind of see quite often happen today, to cling on to something that's a so-called miracle in the Quran, scientifically speaking. So, for example, I'd read somewhere that there were, at the time there were 9 planets because Pluto was counted as a planet. A physics teacher, and I said, look, and I'd been aware that there was kind of a planet X out there somewhere, potentially a 10th planet or 2 other planets. So potentially one larger 10th planet or 2 smaller, 10 and 11. And then I claimed, the Quran says that there are 11 planets in the solar system. And obviously I got that from chapter Yusuf. And obviously it doesn't really say that. All it does is say that there was a dream for Joseph, where he saw his 11 brothers, he saw 11 planets and the sun and the moon to him. And I kind of tried to use that to influence my physics teacher at the time. And then he said to me, well, what if they found another planet after those? Would you just say that wasn't a planet? I said, no, I'd leave Islam. It's obviously bullshit. I mean, he kind of called me out, but I was a kid at the time trying to impress my physics teacher with some so-called scientific knowledge in the Quran. Anyway, I was, I listened to other scientific arguments, obviously. I kind of made that 11 planets up on the spot just to kind of impress him because, science was telling us there was some other planet that's unaccounted for. That was kind of my mentality going into it. And at some stage in my life, I was seeing my older brother and just generally people, friends and family I knew, were quite knowledgeable on Islam in terms of Islamic history. They knew what they were talking about. They knew these figures, which I kind of, they'd just be names to me. I didn't really care that much beyond Muhammad and just like the immediate vicinity of Muhammad. Talking about, I don't know, just Islamic figures from, I don't know, maybe the second, third generation, you know, that's where it didn't really matter to me. But I thought to myself, you know what, if I'm a Muslim, I need to kind of understand this. I need to read the history. I need to understand all this and figure out what's going on. And I did it from a place where I wanted to, you know, consolidate and improve my Islamic faith. I wanted to kind of attach myself even more to Islam. I wanted to become a better Muslim. And by doing that, by researching, by looking into the history, I was really shocked that the version of Islam I'd been kind of spoon-fed since my youth, and you know, all the propaganda that you hear all over the place doesn't really sit up and match what you see in the primary sources. At best, there are two versions. At worst, they are heavily cherry-picking one version and completely sweeping under the carpet everything that could be seen as quite nasty. And so, yeah, I mean, ultimately, when I saw the flaws, when I saw the scientific flaws, the scientific errors, when I understood all these arguments, I couldn't find a way back into Islam. And yeah, and here I am.
Wow, that's quite a story. But you know what is funny? But
I take a long time.
From so many. As soon as they start looking into it, they drop off. And this is so amazing.
Yeah, I think it's, honestly, you know, Muslims will criticize me and say, oh, you know, you're making fun of us. But honestly, I think as long as you have objectivity, intellectual honesty, it's really difficult. It's really difficult to kind of look at it and think to yourself, you know, and be convinced by all the apologist arguments. You know, once it's there and you kind of look at it and you know you're lying to yourself. You really do. You know you're lying to yourself when you say, oh, it doesn't really say that, it means this, oh, that's a wrong translation, that's out of context and all this stuff. All you have to do is look at the context. When you say out of context, I mean, today you'll see people saying out of context all the time, but they never give you the real context. They never say, actually, if you read the two verses before it, this is actually what it says. And if you look at all the tafsirs say this is, you know, allegorical because of this verse before it, this is the way it started. Nobody gives you this detail. It's thrown in your face out of context. And then that's it. They think the argument's won just because they said mistranslation or just because they said out of context. When they say mistranslation, they'll never give you the right translation. And they won't prove it as well. Like when you give the right translation, you need to prove how you've reached this right translation. So, for example, you can go to other similar references in the Quran using the similar words and say, look, in this one, it was translated as this. And if we go to the Arabic and we read the tafsirs, this is what it says. And so this was an error on the part of this particular translator. But when you have more than one translator giving you the wrong translation, there's more of an issue here. It's no longer the fault of the translator. It's now the fault of the message and the messenger. If the message isn't clear, whereas it keeps getting misinterpreted over and over and over again by different people who are actually Muslim, who want the best for the Quran, who want the message to be preserved very well, then there's a problem with the initial message. If it's that vague and it can't be translated properly, then that excuse also falsifies Islam in another way. So I just don't think there are really strong arguments. And obviously, you know, you have people who think it's arrogant of atheists to say, you know, look, we've assessed your religion and we don't think it's true. We think if you had intellectual honesty, you would see the same mistakes that you point out in Christianity, the same mistakes that you point out in Judaism and all the other religions, and you would also see them inside your religion. And as a Sunni, you would see the same mistakes in Sunni Islam that you point out in Shia Islam and vice versa. And so everybody, you know, just out of sheer luck is completely defending their dogma. That's the perfect one that makes full sense. All the others are ridiculous. They agree with us that everything else is ridiculous. But when it comes to their own, it's always, oh, no, there's good excuses for this. And so, you know, it can be frustrating because you're kind of going around in circles. But I think what you need to kind of take into account is, you know, when you're talking one-on-one, maybe it's useless. When you're talking in front of an audience, you let the audience judge. And it's not useless. There will be people in the audience who will start thinking, okay, hang on a second, you know what, this guy makes good points. You kind of hope to do, really.
What do you think is required to make a well, believer in general, but Muslim in particular, pull the plug from being ignorant and being and having this wall around them, and then pulling the stop out of the siphon, and then see the water go down, and then he realizes, oh shit, there's a lot going down there, and there's something at the bottom here. And this is not what I wanted to see, and this is not what I expected to see. But they first need to learn how to remove this plug. How did you manage this, and how do you think a Muslim can manage to get to this giant step from going, hang on, wait a minute, does this make sense?
I think that's $1 million question, isn't it? It's always difficult, and I don't think there's a standard answer for everybody. I think lots of people find different arguments that eventually manage to crack through that kind of protective outer layer that they've set up, just so that they don't, doubt their religion. Sorry, you said something?
No, I said, yeah, I agree with you. This is the problem, and that's why I thought maybe you can give us a hint there from your own experience, because I see that there are. I mean, I've been doing this for I don't know how many years now. I've tried different approaches. I've tried the honest. I've tried the straight. I've tried the different approaches. What I'm doing now is because I realize that the most important thing for a Muslim is the Quran and what Muhammad said about what the Quran says. Now, this to me is already a weakness, because if a God requires a person to go and explain what it says in the book that he wrote, there's always already something wrong. But what I'm doing, I'm tackling now the Quran. I'm saying, show me something in the Quran that is verifiably true. And Muslims cannot do that. So what I'm trying to do is what you are describing, and that is to say, let me take a look at it and start thinking. Do you think there's a better way? What kind of approaches would you suggest, and what have you tried so far?
Like I said, I think everybody has a different approach, has a different thing that will break down this barrier. So for some people, it was just the idea, it was kind of a philosophical idea about just the nature of an all-loving God creating hell. That wasn't something that worked with me. I think you need to find what makes people strongly believe in Islam in the first place, and then try to crack at that. So for example, for me, like I said earlier, one of the things that made me solidify my religion, my own faith, was the scientific argument. And when that fell apart, I just kind of thought to myself, wow, that I was completely duped when I was...
Yeah, but how did that fall apart?
How did that all fall apart? I mean,
yes, because I've got millions telling me, well, Professor Moore, he knows what he's talking about, and of course it's embryology.
Yeah. This is the tricky thing. It really needs to be kind of on a case-by-case basis. You're not going to convert everybody. And I think the problem you're going to have is you're going to, this is going to sound arrogant again by saying this, but you're going to convert the people who are more free-thinking, more independent-minded than, the sheep. The sheep are going to stay sheep, right? I mean, this is the thing. Islam will not break until we get the idea of public conformity. So, you have everybody around you saying, no, we're on the truth. It doesn't matter what your argument is, and if it's solid, they're gonna look to them, to their own people, to their family, to their relatives, to their friends, to their country, to their society, and think. And so they'll doubt themselves, and they'll just kind of. There's always a good explanation, and they'll go and try and look for the explanation. They'll go onto apologist websites. If they don't have the intellectual integrity, they're not going to snap out of it. They're gonna welcome and cling on to any ridiculous argument, as long as at the end it says Islam is true. That's what they want to hear. That's what they go for, and so that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that, and I don't know what it is, and maybe it's kind of trying to potentially make them aware of things like confirmation bias, and it's quite mind-boggling sometimes when you come up with a lot of evidence. And don't forget as well, a lot of these people will have doubts. They won't tell you they'll have doubts, because they'll think you've won if they concede and admit that they have a doubt that's just come in. So you'll get many Muslims who, for example, will come onto my videos, all they'll do is swear at me, dislike the video, tell me I'm an idiot, and then I'll see the same username somewhere else on an Islamic website asking somebody else to debunk my videos. you know, hey, look, we needed to debunk this video. I know, you know, I know.
Yeah, I've
Well,
seen this.
why do you need it debunked? If it's ridiculous and stupid to you, then why do you need it debunked? I mean, it's kind of like, you know, unless you think it's having some kind of effect on the people around you. I mean, sometimes you just kind of need to kind of show them, you know, if you want to show me that I'm wrong, debunk me, fine. But why can't you debunk me myself? I mean, it just, you know, it's just, it's slightly surprising why, I mean, I know some of them do have doubts, but they don't admit it. And you'll get these messages eventually of some people who eventually found their way out, and they'll admit it. They'll say, look, you know, there were loads of doubts. And at the initial phase, I really hated you. Yeah, you get to another stage later on where it's, you know, it's all fine. They've seen through it. But, you know, for everybody, it's a different matter.
So a couple of years ago, if I would have met you, if I would have met you a couple of years ago, and I would have come to you and said, listen, I know that you have doubts. How can I convince you? You would have just laughed me out the room, right?
Personally, I never spoke to, when I was having my doubts, I never spoke to any atheists. I never spoke to people who were outside the religion. So I don't know. I mean, I can't really answer that one and how I would have reacted to somebody who was willingly trying to get me out. But I'll tell you what, the first massive, you know, doubt or two that came into my mind, that kind of left me slightly sleepless at night thinking about it. Those, you know, within a few days, I was pretty sure inside my mind that there was no way back, because I'd looked at all these arguments, I'd looked at everything else, and I thought, okay, this isn't, you know, this is really shocking me and surprising me that my group of people, my belief, are coming up with these ridiculous arguments, and this other group are actually coming up with really sensible, cohesive arguments.
Okay.
And I think one of the other things that made me more susceptible to that is I've always tried to be objective whenever I was younger anyway. So that was one. I mean, I was, you know, growing up as a Shia, seeing the Iraq civil war between 2003 and onwards, between the Sunnis and the Shia, and just, I was, you know, living in Baghdad all that time. So it was quite, you know, annoying to see how everybody was just clinging to their own camp.
Okay.
You know, blaming the others for, you know, for their problems. And so I always thought to myself, you know what, try to see things from the other people's side of, you know, point of view. So, you know, the Shia family friends around me would be like, look, these Sunni politicians, they're ruining Iraq, they're doing this and that. And the Sunnis would be talking amongst themselves about the Shia politicians ruining Iraq and all this and that. And but vice versa, sometimes other people.
But you're not originally from Iran.
Yeah, Iraq,
not Iran, exactly. So you are living in a country, excuse me, where the majority is neither. Where Hussein was trying to get the Ba'ath Party in there without trying to go for Sunni or Shia or anything like that. How did you see the differences between Sunnis and Shias?
No. I'm talking post 2003, the conflict that happened afterwards, after Saddam Hussein. The sectarian violence, the sectarian tensions, all that stuff.
But then it was going more towards the Shia side.
Yeah, I'm not talking about, you know, who's killing who, basically. I'm talking about the mentality of the people.
But how did that strike you? How did you see that internal struggle?
Well, initially you kind of, you know, you're tribalized. So initially you're on your own side. So you're on the Shia side against the Sunni side. But then you get sick of it. You think to yourself, okay, hang on a second. I mean, I can see a few of these Sunni politicians, they're actually decent people. And all you get from the Shias and like friends and family, you get them just saying that they're all disingenuous. They're all not working for Iraq's best interests. They all want terrorists to flourish in Iraq and all this stuff. And yeah, sure, some of them are like that, but not every single one was. And, you know, there were a few examples of Sunni politicians who I thought, you know what, they seem like quite good people. And ultimately what we want is something similar. But it's just kind of getting that out of your mind. I try to kind of put myself in their shoes. And I try to kind of encourage my family to put themselves in their shoes and try and look at things from their perspective. And so I always had that built inside me. And that's why it made it easier for me when I came and approached religion, that I could ultimately look at stuff from somebody else's shoes, look at their arguments, not be so tribalistic in nature. The other thing, there was another reason. I'm trying to remember what it was now, because that was the first one. Damn, my memory is pretty poor in a minute. I'll see if I can remember that.
But you're really disappointing me, because what you're saying is you can only get somebody out of this belief if they want to.
Yeah, there's no other way. If they're ready to, basically, if they're ready to face their fears, if they're ready to have a really honest conversation with themselves, that's the best way you can kind of make them face their fears. I remember the second part, by the way. The second part, like I said, I think is the fact that I was so clingy to the scientific miracles argument, and when that fell apart, that basically also made it kind of difficult for me to kind of think to myself, all right, I need to just make excuses here. Oh, sorry, actually, no, that wasn't it. The second part is watching Christian videos, Christians versus atheists. So I watched a lot of atheists making fun of Christians during this time, and that made it really easy for me to see the crappy apologetics used by both. Just the resemblance between both of them, it just made me think to myself, when you're looking at an atheist and a Christian as a Muslim, you're kind of outside that conversation, right? You're thinking, okay, these are two separate groups. Maybe I have more in common with a Christian, but that doesn't matter to me. They're two separate groups, they're both wrong. And so you look at it that way, and every single time you watch one of these arguments, in my opinion, I was like, oh, wow, the atheist is clearly winning here. It's, they clearly got a more concise argument. When they're bringing up all these examples from the Bible of violence, of contradictions, of all this stuff, scientific errors, violent, contradictory, and errors, scientifically speaking. And so, you don't have the motive to do the mental gymnastics on behalf of the Christians. You can just dismiss it as, yeah, that's wrong. And so when you expose yourself slightly to other religions having an argument, or atheists versus Christians, you kind of think to yourself, okay, hang on a second, and then you go back to the atheist versus Muslim, you kind of see the same pattern of once again. It's very similar, and the excuses are the same. It's mental gymnastics. You can see it very clearly, and I think that also helped me in recognizing that, hang on a second, these apologist arguments are just no different to the ones used by Christians. And if there was a God out there and he really sent a message somewhere, he'd need it to be crystal clear. It wouldn't need any apologetics. It wouldn't need all this mental gymnastics. In this case, if we make excuses for the Quran and Islam, then why not make all these same excuses for Christianity? Why not make all these same excuses for Hinduism? Why not make all these excuses for Sikhism, Mormonism, just whatever religion you can pick? You can make any excuse for any religion, any belief. Doesn't mean that all of a sudden it's true just because you've made up something. I can make up anything to excuse anything. It's not being smart by doing it. It'll be intellectually honest and to kind of thinking, okay, what criteria would you give to falsify a religion? And if you can give me independent criteria which falsifies every single religion but keeps Islam alive, without mentioning anything specific about those religions. So you can't, for example, say, oh, it has to be monotheistic. Well, you have to explain why it has to be monotheistic. You can't say, oh, well, it has to have been through divine revelation that goes to somebody in the desert in a cave. No, you have to explain why. And so if you give me independent criteria, for example, there can be no contradictions by any level of measure and no excuses allowed, then Islam fails. There can be no scientific errors in any sense of the word, and no reinterpretation is allowed. Islam fails again. It just keeps failing and failing and failing. Why? Because it's just like the others. It's a man-made religion. They all have their flaws. If I was to come and take Islam individually, it's not going to be any different to the others when I look at all the apologetics. I think that was a really awakening moment for me, because then I started to see all the apologetics in a slightly different light. I started thinking to myself, okay, hang on a second, this isn't really making that much sense, and you develop more critical thinking, and you kind of, you reach different conclusions to the ones you've been spoon-fed all your life.
Okay. So if you look back now, I mean, you've made quite a splash on the scene. You've lost your channel. It was brought back. If you, I mean, even on Wiki Islam, you are now credited as a source. I was quite dumbfounded with that people are now attacking you in videos, saying the masked Arab said you are being taken as some sort of a real, serious source. What do you attribute this to? That you came with absolutely nothing, and you said, okay, I need to do something because I need to wake up others, and you started taking topics, making videos, and you found your style, and you're sticking to this. What is your reaction if you see now the criticism that you are getting from your old brothers, from your previous brothers?
I was kind of, well, I mean, firstly, I'm not aware that I'm on Wiki Islam, or like, I see myself mentioned in some videos. Some video, Speaker's Corner sent me a video the other day where I was mentioned, but without my name being mentioned. They just kind of showed a clip of my video, and they completely strawmanned the argument. And even then, they didn't really deny what I was saying. So, I mean, I don't know whether, I never really respond to videos. It's not my style or nature. I might do since I've opened up a second channel, but it just depends on the time. I kind of expected that I would get a backlash from Muslims, obviously, knowing that that was going to be the case. The reason why I decided to kind of do my own content is because in order to leave Islam, I didn't take it lightly. This is the thing. You kind of think to yourself, okay, I immediately, like within a week or two, realized that Islam was false, like after researching very intensely for the first couple of weeks. But you don't want to kind of take that final step when there's eternal hellfire looming if you're wrong. So, you get that kind of the creeping doubt in your mind. Well, what if you're wrong? You kind of need to study this a bit more in more detail. And so I exhausted myself for at least about 6 to 8 months, any sources, gathering information, looking at all these arguments, and just kind of going through and through and through, until obviously I kind of realized, okay, A, I'm comfortable to say that I'm not a Muslim anymore, and I never will be again. And B, what am I going to do with all this information? I just wasted 6, 8 months of my life doing all this, just to be sure, because of the threat of hellfire. So I might as well put it to good use. I mean, I'm indebted to the people before me who showed me the flaws in the Quran. So, if I was to click on a video between an atheist and a Muslim debating, yeah, I'd see some flaws in that debate, and I'd look them up, and I'd think, wow, that's actually true. This is something that happened. Or, this is what the Quran does say. And so you can kind of confirm them, and then you can kind of move on. You can study it further. You can research it. You can look at the tafsir and all this stuff. And so I thought, okay, all this information, people with this, let me put this information out there. And I think at the beginning, I don't know. I mean, I was a little naive when I thought, when it came to my family, I thought to myself, wow, Islam is so obviously false that it's going to be super simple to just convince them and tell them, hey, by the way, Islam is false. Here's the evidence. And we can go through it. And if they were to react to these things the same way I did, they'd be out of it by, week 1, week 2. Unfortunately, you see the reactions by people sometimes. You discuss, they're happy to discuss this. The moment you start bringing out more and more points they can't respond to, all of a sudden they want the conversation shut down, and they don't want to talk about it anymore. And you're kind of told, don't say anything, don't speak about this anymore. We're just going to be upset with each other. And it was like, they realized that if they keep going down this road, they'll eventually have to answer a lot more questions that make them uncomfortable. And I think a lot of people just don't want that cognitive dissonance. They just want to live their lives in peace without having to think about harder questions.
Yeah, this is what I hear a lot. Why don't you just leave us alone to live our lives, to live our lives how we want? Not realizing that Islam is a huge problem for the rest of the world. What would your advice be to someone? Like, we have a lot of people with a lot of knowledge here. Would you say the best way is to address this by taking a 3-step approach, where you take a topic, you go and look in the Quran, you take a look what the tafsir say, and then you bring all this together? So you always go into the secondary and the exegesis as well to demonstrate this, or are Muslims not impressed by this at all?
I think they are. They are definitely. You would have to say, you know, it depends on the Muslim, of course. Some Muslim will come in just to have a fight and not really have an actual discussion or actually to listen to somebody else's argument. You know, the way they see it is it's us versus them, and it'll always be that way. Automated like a robot to go in, dislike, you know, write an abusive comment, and then get out of the video and move on to the next video that you can find that's talking about Islam. They think they're doing Allah a service. You know, they're fighting the Islamophobes. That's the way they see themselves. So I think, yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, we kind of find it funny because, you know, obviously some others will try and say something, like will actually listen to the argument. I mean, a lot of people will respond, but then you can tell that they haven't actually listened to the video, just judging by their response. So, for example, on my 7 main reasons why I left Islam video, nearly half the comments I get are talking about Christianity and, you know, trying to dismiss Christianity. And, you know, oh, well, you know, in the Bible it says this, so why did you leave Islam for Christianity? And I'm thinking to myself, well, I never left Islam for Christianity. What are you talking about? In this very video.
Automatic assumption, yeah.
Yeah, but if they were watching that very video, I'm not saying watch the video before it where I actually say I'm an atheist. I'm saying in this very video, I give 7 reasons. And reason number 4 was why I left Islam is because it copies rubbish from the Bible. And I wouldn't say that if I was a Christian. And so obviously they haven't listened to the video. They haven't even gone to the halfway point. And they decided they're going to dismiss me entirely and dismiss the video entirely. And they'll say, oh, you Christians are this, or, you know, and it's just like, you know, you should, if you're going to respond to a video that somebody's kind of made an effort to compile and put together and research, then make it a useful, fruitful conversation moving forward. Don't just be dismissive and then, you know, you're not going to convince anybody. You know, all you're going to do is just show that you're childish who has no good response. You know, if you go into a video and say, hey, fuck you, you know, get lost, I don't like you. It's, oh, whatever it is, you know, same applies both ways, of course. So let's say there was a Muslim video that was making an argument that was a scientific argument. Let's say, for example, they're talking about, I don't know, maybe the expanding universe or embryology or something. And then you go in, and if I was to say dismissively, you know, LOL, you guys are idiots, and then leave, just leaving that comment, I've not done anything. Like, I haven't really contributed to the conversation. I haven't really told anybody why this is wrong.
Yeah, that's a good point. So
they do this all the time. Sometimes I see it done from our side as well to them. And it's useless. It's just a waste of time. And it's just, obviously, all it's going to end up in is people saying, ha, see that? They couldn't respond. And we'll say that about them. They'll say that about us. You know, they couldn't respond. And they'll, you know, you'll just go for that particular one comment and you'll kind of focus on it. And so it'd be nicer, obviously, if people weren't so, you know, dismissive in a childish way, where it's kind of us versus them, the kind of mob mentality. You know, if you have a conversation, have it respectfully. If you have a conversation, if you have any points, bring them up. You know, nobody here is going to be a complete genius who gets 100% of everything right. You know, but at least be honest. Don't just be dismissive of me because I'm an ex-Muslim or somebody who's speaking critically of Islam. If you're to come up on my videos and say, hey, by the way, I thought you actually made really good points across this video, and I agree with you. However, I think that particular thing, you know, that particular point could be interpreted in a different way. And I think you might have, you know, jumped the gun there because this particular tafsir says this. And maybe that's something that's slightly inaccurate. Otherwise, decent video. I will get some videos, some comments like that. And I'm just saying, which one do you expect me to take on, you know, to take, you know, which one do I think is a bit more credible? The one that's just dismissive, that hasn't obviously watched my video, saying, lol, you're a Christian. Your video is stupid, you're an idiot. And then I'm not gonna be affected by that. And neither is anybody else who agrees with me, who watches my video. You know, they're not gonna say, oh, you know, Hisham Khan said that this guy's an idiot. You know, it's not, you know, with these spelling errors in this one line. It's not going to convince anybody, and vice versa, obviously, you know. But I don't know. It's a long story.
Well, this guy Mohammed Hijab on this is a channel name, by the way. He's bringing out this sequence now of science in the Quran, and he brought out an entire sequence about you where you have no clue what you're talking about when you are claiming that Earth is held up by a whale. And I made a response video, and I said, hang on, Masked Arab is not making that claim. All he's doing is he is quoting scholars, Islam scholars, who are making that claim. So don't push it the shoes of him. Go and look at your sources. But they don't understand that.
That's bizarre. I thought I saw that video as well because Speaker's Corner forwarded it to me, and that's why I told you.
Because I replied to this.
He never mentioned me by name. He never mentioned, like, he was just like, you know, to be honest with you, he was slightly respectful. He didn't try and dismiss me as he was saying, you know, Islamic detractors, you know, detractors of Islam, which I'm happy with that title. Yeah. I find it normal. You know, he wasn't trying to say those Islamophobe racists or
no. It was not like that. This is right.
He was quite respectful. So I kind of give him credit on that front. But yeah, I did see the video, and I was wondering, I was quite surprised because he was talking about Zakir Naik, and then he brought me saying, basically quoting stuff to refute Zakir Naik. I think that was the case. And then all of a sudden he brought my whale video out of nowhere. It's a different video. It's not the scientific miracles video I did. It's the whale video. Yeah. Okay. And my whole argument in the whale video, which you obviously understand, is basically, and I spell it out at the end of my whale video because I know people are going to be strawmanning me. And what are they going to say? They're going to say, oh, he's saying the Quran says this when it doesn't say this in the Quran. And I'm saying to them, I'm not saying it says this in the Quran. I'm saying this is how pretty much every major exegete has said this is this is one of the explanations for this verse.
Exactly.
And this shows the limited understanding they have of the cosmos. When they don't dismiss this entirely, when they feel they have to mention it, you know, if they think that this was completely fabricated and false, why would they mention it in their exegesis? And the other thing I added in my video, exegeses, you can't find them saying, you know, when they're talking about the verse in the exegesis itself, you can't find them saying anywhere that this is a fabricated hadith, this is unreliable, this isn't. They don't do anything to reduce the credibility of it. They don't say it's fully authentic either, but they don't say anything to dismiss it as stupid or idiotic. In the video that you watched, they'll say something like, oh, but Al-Tabari says it's one of the most absurd things he's ever heard of. And I'm thinking to myself, watching it, thinking, citation, please. Like, you know, can you offer the citation? Maybe you're right, but I don't know because you haven't provided any citation. In the verse where he says this, in the tafsir itself, he doesn't say that. And I've read all those tafsirs, and I've, you know, when I make that claim, I've made the claim because I've read through the entire tafsirs on that particular verse. In his particular verse, in his particular tafsir for that verse, he never mentions this is, you know, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. The guy on the video said it, but where's the evidence? None. I mean, you know, citation, please. If you have it, brilliant, show it. This is the way that it moves forward. It can move forward because you've proven to me that this guy said it maybe in a different book that I haven't read. But in the tafsir itself, it seems bizarre to me that he would write it in a different book, but not in the actual tafsir itself, explaining the verse. You know, if he felt it was absurd, he should have wrote it in the tafsir itself. But if you have the evidence suggesting otherwise, show me the evidence.
Exactly.
Don't make claims. The other, just to quickly add to that video, the other thing they did was claim, oh, it's one of the Israeliyat. And you've heard this before, I'm sure. You know what Israeliyat is, right?
Yes.
Israeliyat is, you know, stuff they got from the Israelites. They say this a lot. The Muslims will say this.
But it's also just a commentary. This is the point.
Yeah, it's a commentary. But then they'll say, oh, well, they got it, you know, Ibn Abbas or whoever it is that's quoted. They can't deny anything I've said in the video. All they can say is, he probably made that up about Tabari saying it's the most ridiculous thing he's heard. You can't do that. Yeah. But his citation wasn't there, so I don't know if he's telling the truth. He needs to show me the book where he's got this from. Otherwise, I can't trust it on his, you know, on faith alone. I've provided all my evidence when I do my videos. They're not providing any evidence when they're doing their videos. It can be a bit of a lost cause, but I mean, I don't know whether it's worth doing a bit of a response asking for that citation, but I don't know.
No, but I did. And it's the whole thing that they are just working on doubt. And that is all they have. There's nothing really that they can substantiate anything with. They can just say, well, maybe it's not the right way, and maybe it could mean something else, and maybe this is misinterpreted, and maybe this and maybe that. But they don't have real points that they can bring up. This is the whole point. So, okay, because I'm going to ask people, if you have questions for Mas Arab, just go ahead and write them in the chat. I'm going to watch them now because I've seen one already. Mas Arab, what is the next thing that you're going to be doing? What are your plans for the near future?
Okay, I am working on a series that I was told at the end of the series I did on Islam and ISIS. I got a few requests on Islam and women. So people wanted me to do a video on Islam and women. And because it's an argument we're hearing more and more often with this kind of Islamic, I'm saying this in quotation marks, the Islamic feminism.
Okay.
Movement, where you'll get Western liberal Muslim girls who will basically say, you know, Islam is the best thing that's ever happened to women.
Of course.
And so I'm just kind of going to go through that one by one, looking at the main arguments there. Actually, I'm not even going to look at their main arguments for the liberals. I'm just going to look at particular arguments that get denied. For example, you know, the case of FGM, for example. I'll look into it as honestly as I can. Is it something that's Islamic or isn't it? And then we'll go through, and I'll go through all the books, and I'll go through the four madhabs of the Sunnis and the Shia stuff as well. And I'll go through all that information, and then I can present it in an educational format. And there you go. You've got the facts there. You can double check them. You can cross-reference them, whatever you want. Go ahead. You know, I don't make claims just by making statements. I'm not one who makes videos who says, by the way, FGM is totally part of Islam, and then not provide any evidence for what I've just said. I don't like that way. I mean, it's like, well, why should anybody believe me? Right? I mean, why should a Muslim believe me? Same way, why should a non-Muslim believe Linda Sarsour when she says stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, I think this is what I would attribute your an enormous climb that you've experienced over the last 2 years. Because I think it's brilliant that you are so popular, that people are listening to what you are saying, that you make these series, even though not everybody understands them. But I think it's brilliant that what you are doing, what you have done, and your approach. I think it's excellent, and it shows in the numbers. This, you know, the proof is in the pudding. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it shows in the numbers because, you know, not to be, you know, but a lot of channels who spout nonsense will have far more.
Because it's easier, you don't need to think.
Yeah, but you know, I'm happy with you know, whatever audience I get, and I'm never dissatisfied at all. It's you know, if I have an audience of one or two, then it's good. At least, you know, my ideas are going somewhere, and there's a chain going on, right? There's a kind of you know, there's a knock-on effect, hopefully.
Absolutely.
It doesn't just end with the person who's listened to it. That person will go on and spread that information wider.
Yeah, but come on, if you're being cited on Wiki Islam and you're getting videos made around you, then you know you're having an impact. Come on, that's brilliant.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I mean, I get messages pretty much every day from Muslims who are now either doubting and thanking me for my videos because they can see what I'm saying is actually true.
Yeah.
They kind of, you know, they appreciate my honesty, and I'm sure some Muslims will kind of, you know, smirk at that and go, honesty, he's a liar. You know, you'll get that. I get that quite often, unfortunately. But yeah.
Well, I've got somebody here who's saying he debunked you and then he had to block you. Okay, I've got two questions for you. One is,
it had to block me. I mean,
yeah, forget it. We get a lot of trolls here.
I can't see the.
Would you be willing, or would you be interested in debating a Muslim scholar?
A Muslim scholar, yeah. I mean, it has to be a decent Muslim scholar. Wait a second.
Like on what topic?
Sorry, just a second. My son's bringing me little notes. I don't know what he wants. Huh?
Hello, guys. I'm back.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just getting to the point where I'm asking Master Arab what he wants to do in the future, and then the questions. And we now had a question whether he would be willing to go and debate a Muslim scholar. We're just on this point now.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Oh, okay, cool.
My son basically came in asking for something in the room. He was pushing notes under the door. It was very cute. He pushed the note saying, "Can I come in?" And then in brackets he says, "Silently, I need to pick something up."
Wow.
P.S. It was funny. He's got P.S. respond here, and he's drawn a line underneath it. And this is where I was supposed to give my response and slide it back under the
Brilliant.
and then
That's so cute.
Another note came under the door saying, "Please read the other paper." Yeah.
Super.
Yeah. Okay. So sorry. The question was about debating scholars, right?
Yes.
So I mean,
well,
I said that
basically
before.
you're interested. Well, you would be interested in this.
Yeah, I would be interested, but it's kind of, my time is limited. It has to be somebody who has a decent following. I'm going to be a Zakanaik here, and I kind of think to myself, I'm willing to have debates with Muslims and scholars at any time, but it has to be kind of, I'm thinking of setting up a show where I kind of do that in a kind of manageable bite-sized format. But at the same time, if we're talking about people like Zakanaik, if we're talking about people like Mufti Menk, if we're talking about people like Numan Ali Khan, if we're talking about people like Yasser Qadi.
Is Yasser Qadi still a Muslim?
Oh, is he not? I mean, that's
is
news to me if he is. I'm sure he is. I haven't heard otherwise.
I thought he had withdrawn and said he has too many doubts, he can't continue.
What? Has he said this?
This is what I've been told. This is what I heard. I don't know if this is true.
Well, he has a Twitter account. I mean, maybe we can check there. Yasser Qadi. All right. He's still on Twitter. Which would be surprising.
Because he was talking about the versions of the Quran, he was talking about the different languages, he was talking about the claims that it's all in pure Arabic, that there's only one, and so he has a lot of doubts, and he says, well, at the moment, I need to find myself. Yeah, this is what I've been told. I have not heard him say this. I do not know. I've been told this.
I've heard him doubting before, but this is a tweet from 2 days ago, November 8th, from him. The worst of people are those who never remember Allah, even at times of distress, and the best of people are those who always remember Allah, even at times of joy. To remember Allah only at times of distress is a sign of weak faith. Allah is worshipped in all conditions.
No, it doesn't sound like he's withdrawn.
That doesn't sound like to me. And then he's retweeted somebody else who's basically said, one of my favorite recitations of Surah Al-Rahman by Sheikh Dr. Yasser Qadi, and he's retweeted it. So yeah, it seems to me like he's obviously still a Muslim, but I know that he is somebody who's potentially, in the future, you could potentially see him leave.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't seem to be one of those Muslims who is adamant on completely sticking by every single thought or belief he's had in the past. He's more flexible than some of the others.
Yeah, so did you hear his comments after this evolution conference by Adam Dean?
No, I didn't.
Because I heard him, and he said he is unsure of how to respond to this at this moment in time.
I know that in the past he was a Salafi who was very anti-Shia.
Yeah.
And I know that in more recent times he's more tolerant towards other sects of Muslims. I don't know how far that stretches. I mean, whether it's kind of just Shias and Ibadis and everybody else, or whether it's just whether it kind of goes all the way to Ahmadiyya and to Quran-only Muslims.
Okay, then let's not talk about speculation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The second question I got was, what is your opinion of Christian Prince?
I have to be honest, I haven't really heard a lot of what he says. I've heard a lot of, I would see comments on my videos saying, hey, you're Christian Prince, aren't you? I see people commenting thinking I'm Majid Nawaz as well for some reason. Yeah, it's bizarre.
I mean, it's a compliment of a sort, somehow, yeah.
I like the guy. I'm not going to say no. I like the guy, but at the same time, why would he go anonymous if he's already in public?
Yeah,
fairly critical of dogmatic religion. Yeah. Anyway, I mean.
Okay, then let's do it. My last question that I have is: if you look at the modern young Muslims today, where do you think this is going? What is your kind of feeling? What these guys are doing?
You have to repeat that. There was a part of it that I missed. Young modern Muslim what?
Young modern Muslims, where do you think they are going at the moment when it comes to Islam?
Okay. I think it just depends on the area. It depends on the part of the world that they're in. I think in the Islamic world and the Arab world, they might be more prone to becoming liberal than in the West, and it's counterintuitive to a degree, isn't it?
No, this is exactly what I see. I see young kids in Europe that are screaming at people who don't accept Islam, and I see the opposite if I go through Qatar or Abu Dhabi or something, where people are quite liberal by now, going out in the evening, going for drinks, not necessarily alcohol, but very, very freely mingling with girls and everything.
Yeah, I mean, even those who appear liberal aren't always necessarily liberal in when it comes to, for example, tolerance of other religions. They can be liberal because they're not that bothered, they're not that practicing. But at the end of the day, if you were to bring up an accusation or a criticism of the Quran or Muhammad or Islam, I think they'll just revert back to the tribalistic mindset of being furious and arguing with you and just kind of really being angry, because it's as if to them it's like the natural reaction is to be angry, and if they're not angry, then they don't show enough ghira, we say in Arabic. I don't know how you translate that, but like, you don't show enough kind of love and care for your religion if you're not fiercely defending it. But the reason why I say that is because people in the Arab world and the Islamic world generally don't have that victim mentality in their minds as much as Muslims in Europe might have it. So once you have the victim mentality where it's like, oh, they're bombing Muslim countries and they're doing this and they're hurting us, and then somebody leads you along and it becomes a tribalized thing where it's, the best thing to do, because we're all targets now, the Western media and all this, and we have to stick together. We have to be, defending each other. That's more easily found in Europe because they're living amongst the non-Muslims, whereas those in the Arab world and the Islamic world, they kind of don't really give a crap. The young generation, they're kind of sick and tired of all this. To them, it's divisive. It's not really something that they need to forge an identity for themselves. But if you're, for example, a British Muslim, you'll find a problem being British and Muslim at the same time. And so sometimes you'll say, I'm proud to be British Muslim. Sometimes you'll see Muslims saying, I'm not proud to be British. The British are responsible for the Balfour Declaration, or they're responsible for X, Y, and Z. And they're responsible for, partly responsible for the Iraq War. And they'll just come up with loads of reasons why they obviously disagree with the UK as a government.
But it seems to be a pattern, because this is something that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, because this is not on religion, this is on apartheid in South Africa, where I found myself highly critical of apartheid when I was in South Africa, but when I was outside, I found myself defending South Africa, the same kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe that's something that happens. You leave your country, you leave your culture behind, you get a little reminiscent, and you see somebody pointing out a problem. You immediately feel that Islam is your primary identity, and as a result, you basically, you double down and you become more attached to your Islamic background, and it becomes an even more integral part of your identity.
This is a good way of putting it, yeah. Okay, Rob, you carry on.
No, well, I mean, we're going on an hour here, and the Master Arab was very kind to say it have an hour, so I don't want to overrun. I'm very conscious of people's time and the value they've given. So
I'm good to go for another hour if you want to.
Wow. Okay. Easily. We can easily do that. So there was a comment there. Obviously, I don't know what Stops has asked and what you've talked about. I've literally had to step away, so I've just been back listening for the last 10 minutes or so. And then obviously there was some questions which Stops has asked there in in the chat, and I'm guessing I'll play this back anyway, so I can listen to it. But I'm guessing you've done a little bit of an introduction, told people as much as that you're able and willing to do of yourself and so forth. But there is somebody here that did say thank you very much, and I was just trying to find the comments. Said thank you very much for the well-researched channels and videos and so forth. I just seem to have lost that comment there.
You're welcome, whoever it is.
Yes, I'm scrolling back.
Oh, no, you find a lot of appreciation from the people who love your style, who like your very calm and very down to earth and factual approach to all these things. You get a lot of appreciation from very, very knowledgeable people who appreciate your specific style that you have brought to this. Absolutely.
I mean, I think. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Around.
Can I call you speakers, by the way? Because I don't know whether you're okay, I didn't know whether that was kind of a name that you used.
I've been in many videos down in Speaker's Corner, so there's no hiding my ID.
Okay. It's fine. That's good. I'm trying to find the actual video that we're talking on here because I'm on a Hangout, so I can't actually see it. So I've gone to the Gin and Tonic show, which has 900.
Which video was that looking for? Which video?
I don't know. This video. So I can see some of the.
Oh no, this is on Speakers Corner UK channel. Let me give you the actual link to it. Here it is.
Okay.
Then you can see the comments coming in as well. So there we go. I've set into the private chat. Hopefully you can see that. Are you on a mobile? Did you say?
No, I'm on my laptop.
Oh, okay. So in the private chat of Google Hangouts itself, with the three of us, I've just posted the link to the watched version where you can see the chat and the comments on the right side.
Okay, is that between us? Okay, I can see it.
Yes, the Gin and Tonic show has been temporarily suspended from live streaming because we gave out. We've got to be a bit more careful. We gave out the link, and somebody gave it to a couple of spammers, and they came on immediately with like porn and stuff.
Okay.
So what I do now, and I didn't do it for this one, but what I normally do is prevent that. So the moment somebody comes on, they're muted and they can't be seen, and so I will then unmute them in case somebody does that again. Because, but what I would do in the future is just immediately delete the video or immediately edit it or whatever the case. But I left it overnight, not thinking that anybody would do something, so they reported it, and then we got a strike, and I queried it, but they wouldn't take it any further. Hence, we're on this channel until the end of November.
Yeah. Okay. All right, no worries.
I agree with Stops as well. I think your approach from the videos that I've seen is just very factual. It's not emotional, and this is what I noticed with a lot of Muslims, and I don't know what your thoughts are, and especially the ones in Speaker's Corner, in the chats here, and all this sort of thing. There's a lot of emotion, and I think that clouds intellect, as we know. And so, I don't know if you've had a lot of interaction with, probably have with a lot of emotional Muslims rather than dealing with the actual topics.
Yeah, I obviously don't want to, I don't like to make an argument or a discussion or a debate personal. So if I think it's going to be pointless, if it's going to be shouty, if it's going to be, hey, you're an idiot, you're there. So I don't like to get into that. And I don't like to call other people idiots. I don't like, just to have that general conversation. I don't think it brings the conversation anywhere useful. It's there basically for people to kind of enjoy and to kind of keep everybody in their us versus them mentality. Yeah, my guy said this and your guy said that. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's not useful. I do sometimes get emotional when talking about Islam. I mean, I obviously show a calm and collected mentality, let's say, as best I can. But yeah, it's not always going to be the case. I think sometimes the topic itself is going to be quite highly charged. And, if somebody's deliberately not, listening to the point, if somebody's deliberately misconstruing your argument, that kind of stuff, then yeah, it can be a bit of an issue. And obviously not everybody can hold it back, but I don't know, we'll have to see.
I do reasonably well when I'm down the Speaker's Corner. Occasionally, however, I did lost my cool. It wasn't recorded. I don't mind if it was, actually, with Ali Dawa and some of the, you may or may not know that there's sort of characters, let's call them, down at Speaker's Corner that people follow, and I appreciate you may not follow many of them. But he's one of the sort of dogmatic ones that It's got, he perfectly demonstrates, in my view, the Dunning-Kruger effect, which you may...
I'm aware of it, yeah.
He's that sort of guy, and when you have that sort of argument, but very certain. So people are standing around and go, wow, this guy knows what he's talking about. But that's the credulousness of many viewers that I notice. Very few critical thinkers that I can suspect. And my view is, and again, I'm happy to be proven wrong by a religious person, is that every religious person, Muslim or Christian, at some point, their critical thinking has just been deactivated or reduced or whatever the case is. Because when you hear them challenge each other, then they're thinking critically, then they're thinking like I and Stops and you would be thinking. But on their own religion, it just vanishes.
Yeah, sure. I don't know. It's I've seen a few videos of Speaker's Corner. I'm not 100% aware of all the characters who are there. And, I generally just see random videos here and there. It seems quite an interesting place to talk. I've seen people be threatening and abusive. I've seen, there's a Christian guy who goes there regularly. I forgot his name now. Something Jay Smith. Jay Smith. Yeah, Jay Smith. That's right. So he goes there, and I remember he once went there with loads of Qurans, and then, somebody was trying to attack him and take the Qurans from him. And then he kind of, I think he managed to get out of there with his Qurans.
Yes, I think it was the one with the 26 different versions.
Yeah.
Last Arab, if you are going to be here a little bit longer, there's a question I've always wanted to ask and never dared to do. What kind of reaction do you get, or is there a difference in the reactions that you get between your English and your Arabic videos?
I probably do get differences in reactions, and there are certain arguments that you will get in Arabic videos that you won't get in English videos.
More factual or the opposite?
No. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of factual stuff going on in either. I'm talking generally here. I'm not talking specifically to my videos. Yes. But there is this thing in Arabic, whenever Arabs have discussions with atheists who are Arab as well, pretty much the first question they will ask, and like Arab atheists will know this, who are on forums, on Facebook groups and all this stuff, you'll see the first question that an Arab will ask is pretty much always like, if you're now an atheist, why don't you have sex with your mother or your sister? That is nearly always the first question I see from a Muslim who is for the first time meeting atheists who are Arab. And so you'll see that question repeated over and over and over and over again. You don't really get that on the English debates. So Muslims who speak English generally don't say that, but you get it all the time on the Arabic pages. So yeah, I mean, that's one big difference that you get. Otherwise, I don't know.
What's your response to that, by the way? So when you get that question, do you ever bring up, a first cousin incest in Islam, or how do you deal with that question when it's asked? Because for us, I guess the three of us,
to be honest with you, I don't really engage in that kind of question. Okay. It's but it's I've seen obviously many people do respond to it in particular ways, and I would use that as an argument. First cousin marriage would be viewed as incest by other people, so there are different standards set to what is incest, and
yes,
first cousin incest would be,
there's the scientific evidence, isn't there, that incest
would be there,
it causes deformities and growth defects and so on.
Well, yeah, it does. It causes a higher percentage of all that. And I think, don't quote me on this entirely, but I think there is actually one of the schools of thought in Sunni Islam, at least, says if a father has a daughter born out of wedlock, she's not officially recognized as his daughter. And therefore, the conclusion is that would she be haram for him to have sex with? And on one occasion, I believe it isn't haram because she isn't officially considered his daughter, given that she was born out of wedlock.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because I mentioned this a couple of shows ago and people said, no, you're absolutely wrong. That's totally impossible. So I'm glad that somebody else also knows about this.
Yeah, yeah. And just for the record, I didn't watch the show that you're talking about. And I'm not 100% sure on it either. I need to look it up again.
I
So,
provided
but
evidence.
I do think it does exist. I've seen it somewhere before. It's one of those where you it'll take ages to look up again.
We have got Saracen. I'm going to bring him into the discussion now. So we have got a Muslim here who would potentially like to have a somewhat of a discussion with you in whatever way. So let me add Saracen. Good evening, Saracen. Are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, good evening, Rob. Good evening, Stops. Good evening, Master Arab and everyone in the chat.
So now's your chance to ask a question then.
No, to be honest with you, Stops, I really found your discussion with him quite interesting because, I didn't really understand, it's really interested to hear the kind of background that you come from, because you've mentioned that, in the past that you have a Middle East heritage, but to know that you grew up in Iraq and you saw that live, I mean, what would you say your experiences, how much do you think your experiences affected you in your decision to leave Islam? What did you see, like the barbarism that happened in Iraq?
I wouldn't say that they contributed in a lot of ways. At the first instance, when I was seeing sectarian violence and I was seeing religious, let's say, religious idiocy, idiocy being spread in places of Iraq between both sects, my initial gut reaction as a Muslim back then was, oh, this isn't Islam. None of this is Islam. They're doing a disservice. Where one people, where one religion. This is kind of politics. It's getting involved and all this stuff. And to a degree, it might well be. Like there is politics involved in there. You can't deny that. But at the same time, we know, and I'm sure, I don't know what your background is in terms of, you kind of explained it briefly, but to me, you come off as somebody who's not very well, not somebody who would agree with a lot of Salafist.
They'll tell you on this show I'm probably the most anti-Salafi out there, but I completely understand Salafi is a big strand. There are some good ones out there, but generally I'm really
but then then when you go to certain certain strands, let's say, of Sunni Islam, they can get quite toxic, problematic, whatever those words are that feminists love to use today, but I think it does apply definitely to a lot of Salafists. There are Salafists, by the way, who aren't outwardly violent and can be quite a lot more sensible than the others. And unfortunately, it's just a matter of who you're talking to. There was a Salafist who was the head of parliament in Iraq, who was openly Salafist, but he was actually one of the most tolerant people there in terms of working with the Shias and working with the Kurds. And sometimes when the Sunni Islamists, the other Sunni Islamists, throw a fit and want to boycott the government, boycott parliament, and all this stuff, and kind of get on the fringes and start slightly supporting some of the terrorist activity that's going on. He was kind of fully in the face of that as a Salafist. So obviously everybody can be, you can find anybody who's decent and crap from all sorts of places.
What kind of you said you researched the 2 weeks. I mean, what kind of led to your doubts? That's another question I had.
What led to my doubts?
The main sort of things, the ones that really hit you.
The ones that hit me initially, I've spoken about before, was when I watched a documentary on the life of Muhammad, wanting to know more about it in a positive light, wanting to kind of discover more about it and, better my knowledge of Islamic history during the time of Muhammad. And there were a few things that were mentioned in there that that really didn't sit well with me. So the first was the fact that slavery was never abolished. I had for some reason grown up being told by people that Islam basically got rid of slavery, and it was the first religion in the world to get rid of slavery. And I was, I took that as a matter of pride, and I would tell people, hey, that's about Islam. This is great, So when I realized that wasn't actually quite the case, that came as a bit of a shock, the other one was the fact of the massacre of Banu Qurayza. So when I heard about that for the first time, I just could not believe it. I thought to myself, shit, that's, how can I differentiate Muhammad from ISIS?
Sure.
There is no way I can. Because if somebody's willing to go and kill 600 people in one afternoon, beheading one by one, I just imagined it as an ISIS video.
Yeah.
And I imagined what the reaction would be if people saw that kind of video online.
Yeah.
And they'd say, nothing to do with Islam, nothing to do with Islam. And then, well, hang on a second. According to Islamic history, this is what happened.
But do you believe that though? Do you? I mean, because Tom Holland's book, I think it's The Shadow of the Sword. He doubts the whole episode. And also, I think Sheikh bin Bayah, who's one of the scholars I do follow, he's one of the big scholars. He also doubts. He actually went and did some research in the whole area. He said it was exaggerated. A lot of exaggeration was happening.
Even if it's Saracen, even if it's exaggerated,
yeah.
Let's say the figure was closer to 100 or 200,
sure,
instead of 600 to 900. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still can't justify that. I still can't see a justification in my mind of that being the right course of action. Let's say we whittle it down even further and we go down to 10 or 15, as opposed to 100 or 200. Still, even if that was greatly exaggerated, I don't think that was the right course of action. Second thing is that action is actually linked to a couple of verses in Surah Al-Ahzab in the Quran. And most major tafsirs bring this incident back to Banu Qurayza. So we can ultimately keep doubting and saying, hang on a second, did this really happen? Hang on a second, was this just written afterwards to pretend or to make Islam look mightier than it was, or something like that, or to scare the Jews? I don't know. What purpose would they have for writing this in if it wasn't true?
I think my research, from what I researched there, I think that there's something definitely happened. I believe there was treachery. I believe that this group of Jews did, they basically put the whole community at risk, including other Jews who were part of the constitution of Medina. It wasn't just Muslims. So
okay, but the other Jews by that time were already expelled.
That's not true, because we have in Robert Hoyland's book, The Pathway to God, we have Jews mentioned that were part of the Arab conquest. It wasn't just the Muslim conquests. It was more of an Arab conquest, which included Jews and Christians. So,
from what we have of Islamic sources, I mean, Robert, what was that?
Robert Hoyland, The Path.
Okay, what does he base his information on?
He's an Oxford historian, so he's obviously used primary
sources. Still, he's an Oxford historian, but that's a kind of an appeal to authority.
Yes.
We still need to know what his sourcing is, right? I mean, if I was to write a book today, for example, and claim something happened in Islam, in the Islamic world, it's going to be very difficult for me to show what my sourcing is going to be, right? I mean, if I was to say, for example, that Muhammad was gay, and I wrote a whole book on it, I'd need to start looking at certain sources and potentially, getting to my conclusion through sources that are already there, right?
No.
So somebody born in this day and age is going to have to go back to earlier sources because they weren't there to see anything directly. They weren't there to kind of, they need a previous historical source, a previous religious source to come to that conclusion.
And I think what he based his research on, from the top of my head, from what I can recall, he used a lot of the Christian sources. So he used like the Byzantine sources, he used priests from there. They talked about the early history of the Arabs. It wasn't so much seen as a Muslim conquest as opposed to which is in later history how it's made out, this big khilafah that came and ruled the whole world.
It isn't later history. I mean, some of this stuff was written 200 years after Muhammad, right? I mean, Ibn Ishaq was written quite, relatively soon after Muhammad's death. I mean, 200 years is still a massive time. But still, it's relatively soon compared to somebody like the Oxford historian that you were talking about.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what we see from those sources is that Bani Qaynuqa were first to be expelled, and then it was Bani Nadir, and the last remaining one was Bani Qurayza.
Yeah, but
and so when you're saying that they were still there in the city, I don't think that's the case. I mean, not by Islamic standards and Islamic history at least.
Well, then how do we reconcile the fact that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he was killed by a Persian, a non-Muslim, by all accounts?
Omar.
Yeah.
Omar. Yeah. Who was that? Was that Persian a slave or was he free?
Yeah, no. But one thing, the fact that there was a Persian within there, and they killed him. There's
I know.
also
I know, but was the Persian a free man or was he a slave?
no, there's a slave. There was a slave. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's how you explain
There's
it. You know, slaves can be brought from anywhere.
I mean, there is a lot of evidence to suggest that there was many other tribes. There's a really good Sheikh Hamza Yusuf talk. I can't remember. I've heard it, but I haven't heard it for a while.
Is he the convert?
Yeah, he's
Hamza Yusuf?
yeah, from America.
He's the Sufi guy, right?
Yeah, he's well, he's not really. He's he's a Maliki, but I mean, often Sufism is seen as something different. But no. Yeah, so he's done a really good talk about that, about some of the Jewish tribes.
About Banu Qurayza?
No,
but still, how would you explain treachery like that? I mean, you know, I hear that quite often. Muslims say, "Hey, you know what? They were treasonous."
Yes.
And okay, so they'll quote the Constitution of Medina.
Yes.
What is the Constitution of Medina, and who was it signed with? The earliest sources don't say it was don't say that they were signed with the Jews. It says that they were signed with the Ansar. So they were signed with the Aus and Khazraj.
There's actually let me see if I've got the Constitution. There's actually a Jewish guy.
Yeah, it depends on which sources you look at. The earliest sources don't mention the Jews signing this at all.
The earliest sources, the one I've got, the Constitution, it does mention Jews signing it.
And the one you've got, maybe.
Yeah, and it does say that it was one ummah. So they were all seen as one ummah.
I'm aware of later sources saying this. I'm just saying the earliest sources didn't mention this at all.
That's interesting. I wasn't aware.
The Arab, the Ansar were the ones who signed this. It wasn't the Jews.
Could it be?
And besides, let's hypothetically, let's grant you this. Let's say that they did sign this, right? Could the Jews of Banu Qurayza not have said, well, hang on a second, you threw out the Bani Qaynuqa and you threw out the Bani Nadir. So by all, you were the one who basically got rid of the Constitution first. You were the one that got rid of this agreement. Why should we be continuing with an agreement after we've seen you do this to the other Jews? Do they not have a right to say this?
No, they have a right to say that. But I think there's a whole history before that. If you have an agreement, and I think this is where we have to almost put our minds in that 7th century, in the culture of honor, in the culture of. It's very hard for us to understand.
This is where I disagree, Saracen, because what we're doing is making an excuse for them. We're saying we have to put our minds and understand the mentality in the 7th century.
Yes.
Which I'm happy to do if we're talking about the Mongols. I'm happy to do if we're talking about the Roman Empire. I'm happy to do if we're talking about Alexander the Great. I'm not happy to do that when you're going to come and tell me that the person in charge of this particular group is infallible, the last messenger, and guided by God.
Yes.
There's a massive difference between humans making mistakes that were reflective of their mentality in the 7th century and what we claim to be the ultimate human and the ultimate message and the ultimate goodness.
But if he had the state, though, let's say he has a state. So basically, at this stage now, he's commander in chief. Yeah. So imagine we have a state like, let's say Wales, for example, and they sign an agreement with England. And then England suddenly turn on them, and they sell out, and then they try to help. Ireland.
Sell out how?
Let's say Ireland wants to come and now invade Wales. Let's just go with this argument. Now England have made an agreement with Wales, and suddenly they turn around and they start helping. The Irish. Then suddenly Ireland lose, and England become weak. That's complete treachery. You put the whole country, you put everyone, including the women, children, at risk.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you solve that? Would it be wise that the English go into Wales, kill every single man and boy that's past puberty?
But they were judged by their own book.
And then doesn't matter. And then enslave their women and children.
Yeah.
You can't judge somebody by their own book if their own book is a pile of shit.
No. Well, this is the thing. The Prophet ﷺ didn't say he said, let it be judged by how you want to be judged. And they judged by their own book. And the judgment for their own book was treachery.
Saracen, that isn't the case. That's what Muslims say all the time, okay? What happened is, he got Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, right? He basically spoke to the Aus. When he wanted to pass out judgment on the Bani Qurayza, the Aus came and begged him, the tribe of Aus.
Yeah, I know the Aus.
So the Aus were allies to Bani Qurayza, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, the Khazraj were allies to Bani Qaynuqa and Bani Nadir.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so the Khazraj in the past managed to convince Muhammad not to kill them. Initially, he wanted, I think, Bani Qaynuqa, the first tribe, he just initially, according to Muslim sources, he let them go.
Yeah.
He basically, well, not let them go, he exiled them.
Yeah,
That was his first course.
Yes.
That was his first course of action. With the Bani Nadir, he actually wanted to kill them. And then the Khazraj came and said, no, we beg you, please spare them, just exile them. And so that happened. So when he was looking like he was going to kill the Bani Qurayza, the Aus came and begged him again and said, look, we really don't want you to do this. Just spare them like you spared the first two. Don't kill them. And then Muhammad said to them, at the time, remember, where was Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh? Where was he at this moment?
I believe, was he behind the curtain, or I don't know. He was injured.
Well, he was in a
wasn't
tent.
He was injured.
Exactly. He was injured in the Battle of the Trench.
He was injured.
Through an arrow, and he was on the outskirts basically. He wasn't anywhere near them.
Yeah.
So the group of people talking to him are other people from the Aus. Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh had gone and threatened the Bani Qurayza before the Battle of the Trench. Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh was known for his hostility towards Bani Qurayza.
Where would your source be for that? I'm just stop. We might not have it. It's fine. I'm just really interested.
It's in the Sirah. Okay. We can kind of go
Which
through.
Which Sirah would that be?
Ibn Ishaq through Ibn Hisham.
Yeah.
And so I think it's Ibn Ishaq ibn Hisham. If not, it's Tabaqat ibn Sa'ad. I'm not sure which one.
Sure, no, that's fine.
We need to look through that. But anyway, so he says to the Aus, he says, all right, will you accept if one of you becomes the person who passes judgment? What did they think? The Aus said, yeah, of course, yeah, no, we'd accept that, because they thought they were the ones stood there telling him to be lenient, we're going to pass the judgment. So they said, yeah, of course we would. The Jews at this time had no say in this. They'd already surrendered. They'd already kind of been lined up, awaiting their execution potentially, or maybe before they were lined up, just in case somebody wants to get super accurate. I don't know exactly. But basically that was the case. And what happened? When they say to him, yeah, of course we wouldn't mind being the ones who pass judgment. He said, okay, well in that case I call on Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh. And Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh obviously is somebody from the Aus as well. Surprised, because he kind of caught them out in a bit of a loophole when he said, okay, I'll bring him in, because he knew Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh didn't like them. And Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, when he comes and he says, okay, I pass judgment by killing all these people, everybody who's passed,
just to stop you there, doesn't it also say that they picked Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh? They said, yes, he's the most noble, he's the best, we want him. Doesn't that also say that in some of the hadith? That's in the hadith and some of the seerah. That's
maybe in the hadith which came later. Maybe in the hadith which actually came later in the seerah. Maybe it says that in the hadith. I can't say no definitely.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've read that they chose him, they were praising him. And
I've read it in the seerah. In the seerah, I don't think anybody was super excited and hyped that Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh was going to come and pass judgment. They knew what the judgment was going to be.
Yeah.
And so Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh comes and passes a judgment, which by my calculations, is probably one of the worst judgments you can ever pass. And to me, it makes no difference if it was in a barbaric book like the Torah. That doesn't make it good. If Muhammad was really a peaceful man, and we say the religion of peace and all this stuff, and if Allah was actually just, why the hell would they check for pubic hair for people who may or may not? That means it was collective
really
punishment.
doubted. That's really doubted. That's highly.
Well, it's an authentic narration.
Is that in the seerah? Because there's a hadith about that as well. I know there's a hadith about checking the pubic hair and all that.
Checking the pubic hair is a hadith that comes from Atiyah al-Qadhi.
Yes, you're right. But that's there's a lot of people seriously doubt that. Jonathan Brown has done a really good one.
Jonathan Brown is a well-known apologist. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to see what his.
I actually like him. I don't agree with everything he says, but I think Jonathan.
I'm sure you would. But, his mental gymnastics deserve a gold medal, I think.
I think you two would have a good conversation.
Really? I think so. All right, let me see if I can find it. It's classified authentic anyway. Yeah. I mean, I can maybe.
No. Listen. I'm not hadith absolutist. I'm more. I follow the Hanafi Maturidi tradition, the early one, and there's a number of hadiths. I'll just put it out there, and we'll get back to the conversation. I'll just put it out there that we don't believe that every hadith in Bukhari, even if it's authentic, so-called quote unquote authentic, we don't believe. And you can dismiss it and say, oh, we're picking and choosing. But what we do is we go to the qualified, like the early scholars like Imam Jassas and people like that, who said that there's so much fabrication due to the what we call the Hashawis, or what we call the Qisas. And Ibn Ishaq used to go to a lot of the Qisas, which were like storytellers, and they would exaggerate things. So I'm quite skeptical about Ibn Ishaq, I'm not going to lie, because you know, I do read a lot of the Maliki stuff, and Imam Malik was very skeptical about him. But you know, please carry on.
Saracen, is there a list of hadiths which you do not trust and which you do trust?
There is. I usually, the ones that I go to a few scholars, and they will verify it. But the monkey stoning, for example, I don't believe in.
No.
The magic, I don't believe in.
Is there a list? Is there a list that people can check and see? Okay, this is what these guys believe in, and these hadiths are.
There was actually a few books, early books that are written. Unfortunately, they are in Arabic. I know one of the chefs that I speak to has got that book. There's not much.
Yeah, but you're making a claim here. You're saying that there are certain hadiths which you don't trust, which you claim are not valid, and you say there are some that you do. Now, this for me is sounding very much like selective reality or something.
No. The reason I say that is because I verify, I speak to, you know, these are the sort of things like what we're having a discussion about. These things bothered me, the checking of the pubic hair, etc. I didn't, you know, I listened to these arguments before, and I went and checked it with some of the shuyukh that I study with, and this is completely invalid.
So the ones you don't like are invalid, and the ones you like are valid, or what?
Well,
is there something that we can check?
No, of course, that's a skeptical way to look at it. But I'm saying if this was made up, for example, I'll give you an example.
How did no, hang on a second, Saracen. How did the sheikh that you spoke to, who told you it was completely invalid, come to that conclusion?
He studied very high level hadith science from across the world.
Okay, so he's more knowledgeable than the other
much more than Mufti Abu Layth, even much more.
No, I'm not talking about Mufti Abu Layth. I mean, I don't know if he believes him or not, but we're talking here that, for example, I mean, personally, I don't trust in hadiths, I don't trust in the Quran, I don't trust in Syria, right? So to me, I mean, I'm not somebody who's saying this is reliable 100%. This happened exactly the way it did, because I don't trust any of them. But my problem becomes, if this is something that Muslims have now carried on in history, and in their authentic hadiths, in their seerah, this story appears, and the Quran tells us that we need to take Muhammad as a perfect example, so then there's a problem here. There's a massive issue. I can't all of a sudden say, well, I like this hadith, I don't like that hadith, because I know that the overwhelming majority of Muslims believe in Sahih Bukhari, and the overwhelming majority of Muslims believe in Sahih Muslim, and the overwhelming majority of Muslims believe in the 4 classical schools of jurisprudence and what they teach. And so therefore, if somebody says to me, well, this is all completely misunderstood, there's just been, hey guys, there's been a misunderstanding here for 1400 years, but now in 2017, I'm going to give you the right answer. To me, of course, I'm skeptical. Of course, I'm going to be thinking, well, hang on a second, this makes no sense to me, because if there was a just, merciful God, he wouldn't allow his religion to slip away so much, and he wouldn't allow so much barbarity, so much violence, so much ridiculous stuff to go and pepper itself into all these sources, left, right, and center, and then be carried forward as truth and as the religion itself. So, for example, one question I could say is one point I could raise is the hijab. Personally, I don't think it's really in the Quran very clear cut that you need to cover your hair.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's kind of that's built up from the hadiths, that's built up from the fuqaha later. Okay, and I think there's a good argument if somebody wants to reform Islam to say that hijab is not really necessary. Okay, I think that's a good argument. But can I say that hijab is not part of Islam? I can't say that, because now Islam is what Islam has been taken to be, given all these sources, given what people believe about it. That it's like, to me, it's like, well, God surely, a just, loving, merciful God, wouldn't confuse followers who come in with the best of intentions. These people really want to worship him. They want to do the best thing that he wants them to do. They want to know exactly what he wants. They don't deliberately go and follow the false hadith because they know they're false. So why give them so many false hadith? And why give them all these hadith portrayed in the nice sahih colors? You know, it's just it's mind-boggling to me why I would still believe in a religion which obviously is so confused from within.
Yeah. So when we use it, we use a lot of akal in our sort of methodology. Now, if it doesn't correlate, so if you've got hadith that, you know, it says stone stone people, it says kill the apostate, you know, we have to question those hadiths.
Yeah, but we know, Imam Malik and the senior scholars around him were all in favor of this stuff.
Yeah, so Imam Malik, I'm not sure if he wasn't in favor of stoning, as far as I know.
Oh, come on, he does.
No, I'm not sure that he was in favor of stoning. Perhaps I'm wrong. I know.
Why would the school of Malik? Why would the Imam Malik school be in favor of stoning? Why would that be the punishment?
No, but what I'm saying is this is what I'm saying. So early, if we have the early period, let's divide this period. So early on, we have this period where there's a lot, especially like obviously the Maliki, the Quran, Aql. Yeah. Similar with Imam Abu Hanifa, you know that
just to clarify to the viewers. Sorry, when you say something like Aql, just to explain it. So Aql is intellect. It's kind of using your reason.
Yes, exactly.
That's what because some people aren't going to understand what you're going to say about Aql.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you.
So basically, what Saracen is saying is there's a hierarchy in what you go back to. So initially, Quran is number one.
Yes, and
then you go to reason. Yeah. And then you go to hadith. That's what he's saying. I think that's not true. I think all these schools of thought, including the Maliki school of thought, goes Quran, hadith, and then if they do eventually get to reason, that'll be beyond.
No, because because in our school, and this is why I was going back to the hadith problem, that there are a number of stuff completely fabricated, especially early on. You have to know the politics of the time, where you have the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Zubayrids, and you've got these storytellers, and people are just fabricating hadith left, right, and center, you know, all over the place. So then you have the hadith scholars that emerge, and they're called the traditionalists, al-hadith, that try to go and sieve out what's authentic, quote unquote. But each school has different principles. So, for example, there was about 500 early schools. It went down to four or fifth, if we call the Jafri school, you know, and we call the Jazayri school. But anyway, what happened is each of them had different principles. So the Hanafis, for example, had a lot of Mu'tazila in there. The Mu'tazila were what were often called the rationalists, but they weren't rationalists. They were called the secutionists. They were like the elite. They had their own sort of sect. They had their own beliefs. But unfortunately, a lot of them also were Hanafi because they used the kind of Imam Jassas, who I mentioned earlier, was Imam Zamakhshari. They were massive scholars within the Hanafi fiqh. Unfortunately, after the kind of Inquisition, the Mu'tazilites' rationality kind of suffered in a way. You know, people went back to the hadith, and Islam became very literal.
Okay, so can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Okay, let's just get back to basics before we get into all this, the Hanafi and the Zamakhshari and all this stuff, right? Let's go back to the basics. You were talking about hadith scholars, right? And, you know, you'd use them to know which hadiths are reliable and which aren't. But we know that there are plenty of hadith scholars, all differing in terms of what's reliable and what isn't. So I'll give you an example. For example, Sunni scholars of hadith will find Abu Hurairah very reliable, right? Yeah. Most of the time, they'll find him very reliable. And they use his hadiths more than anybody else when you come to Bukhari and Muslim. Go to a Shia hadith scholar, and they'll laugh at you if you mention the name Abu Hurairah. They'll say he's absolutely useless.
Agreed.
He's somebody who is completely unreliable, and they won't find Aisha reliable either. And so it's a subjective science, right? Hadith. I think it's quite a disservice to science when you say science of hadith. I know there's a methodology behind it, but at the same time, it's slightly subjective. How do you know? Let's say you have a chain of 15 names. How do you know that name 8 in that list is unreliable? You have to trust somebody else's word that person was unreliable.
I agree with you. And that's why, for example, the most authentic book for me is the Muwatta of Imam Malik. We've got very short chains. It's got someone I trust, which is Imam Malik, and that's cool. The Hanafis have their own books. But unfortunately, just to, sorry to cut you off, but recent modern day Muslim Hanafis have taken on the approach of what Sherman Jackson calls they become crypto Shafis. So they've taken the Shafi principles, which is Bukhari is the most authentic book, and Muslim is the most authentic book. And if it's in there, we have to believe it, and it's sacrilegious to question it. And this kind of hadith absolutism is what is so dangerous to the Muslim world.
Yeah, I agree with you. Obviously, I think dogmatism, not just confined to the Hadith, I think confined to the Quran as well, is dangerous for the Muslim world. I don't think it's only the Hadith. So, for example, in my opinion, if somebody was to ask me, can we reform Islam? I'd probably say no. I think it's unreformable unless we get Muslims starting to admit that the Quran isn't fully preserved, isn't perfectly preserved, that there could be some problems within the Quran as well. And that way they just kind of disregard it altogether, believe in the basics, one God, Day of Judgment. They want to pray, they can pray. But then when it comes down to anything that's in the Quran, they don't have to do the mental gymnastics. So, for example, somebody tells you to explain the wife-beating verse. You can dismiss it and say, you know what? That could just be one of those that was added later. I don't think a true God that's merciful would ever write something like that. You know, you can get rid of the problematic verses without all the mental gymnastics.
I think that's the Majid Nawaz approach. You're going to be called Majid Nawaz again. You do sound like him, by the way. You really do.
Again. Do I sound like him? Do I sound like him?
You do. Right. Actually, I had to double check. I thought it was Majid on first, but no, I hear what you're saying. I mean, personally, I would never do that because I do believe that the Quran.
Have I ever done a live stream at the same time that he was live on LBC?
Oh gosh, you should. It'd actually be quite funny to tune in to watch that.
See, I've never done that, so you never know, right?
There's something to do on Sunday.
Exactly, there's a conspiracy theory for you.
Yeah, definitely.
I think also, but the Master made a good point in the sense that whenever these hadiths or whatever are brought up, none of your scholars, I'm going to use that term in quotes there, Sarah, none of your scholars come back and go, you know what, we've looked into this, and in fact, wife beating, pedophilia, or whatever it may be, it is in fact authentic. Everything that's been challenged by the West, your scholars or people that you want to follow, whatever the case is, have suddenly come together and decided, no, this is unreliable or there's some problem. Never once do they come and say, do you know what? Yep, it is in fact true. And we're going to stand by that. And you, the West, we don't care what you say. We just don't.
No, I don't think that's true. Like, for example, you know, I completely disagree with the hadith about the age of Aisha. And I watched Master Arab's video on that, which is, you know, that's the one of the things that really made me research that. You know, I completely disagree with that kind of that hadith, and I've been out there, but most Muslims in the park will say nope, it's in Bukhari. You know, the people were very young at that time. It's okay to marry at 6-7 years old, and then she was 9 or 10 maybe at best. I reject it. I completely reject that hadith. You know.
No, but why do you reject it? Because it's had a collision with the Western modernity.
No.
If you were a Muslim living in the Middle East, where Muslims seem to find this okay, or even the ones in Speaker's Corner, you wouldn't be saying that. So you've got the Western mentality, and now you're desperately trying to have this sort of civil war in your head with, okay, I've got the Western mentality, and I've got to try and make it fit.
No, for me, Rob, I'll be honest with you. As long as it's true, it's true. So I don't care if it's a Western mentality. Perhaps I've been influenced by the West. I can't deny that. You know, my experience. I don't know to what extent, but generally, you know, I do morally think it's wrong to marry young girls. Absolutely. And for me, I have in the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best of creation. You know, and I've seen all the evidence, that earlier evidence that says she was much older. You know, and we could go into that. And I know Master has just got loads of stuff on there, but you know, for me, that it far outweighs that. And Mufti Abu Layth, the one I mentioned earlier, I actually asked him this question. I made a video and I challenged him, and he actually did a 2-hour response. It's probably worth listening to.
Sorry, a 2-hour response to what? Sorry.
Was the age of Aisha, why she wasn't 9 years old or 6 years old when the actual nikah.
Okay, so he's the people who say she was 19 or something. Is that?
Yeah, he believes that she was in her teens, and I would go with that. But anyway, we're digressing. What Robert asked was, you know, why is it that the ones that you don't? And I'm saying there's people out there that absolutely stick to it, and there's other people like myself that say no, we reject it, and it's not because of the West, it's because what I believe is true.
Yeah, but then again, this goes back to what the Master Arab said. If this is the messenger of God and it is in fact God's word, there should be none of this should ever happen where we have got this like, these scholars say this, these ones say this. If this book was meant for mankind, that I and everybody else stops in the Master Arab and everybody else could read and accept clarity, then we wouldn't have this problem. So this is the other thing that you have. I'm more sympathetic to the people who go, yes, I read the Quran and what is in the Quran, and I read it as a normal person, and I'm not retarded or anything, and I read it and I believe it. You've got to do a bit more tap dancing. So from my point of view, you come up a bit weaker because you've got to go and look at all these scholars, where if the claim is that the book is for all mankind and he's the prophet, then none of this should be a problem. We should be able to read this, and all of us, 4 of us, and in fact 7 billion of us would agree, hey, this is completely true and it's accurate, and we don't have different interpretations.
But Rob, remember, I don't think everyone's going to hell if you're not Muslim. Remember, I don't follow that mentality. I know some Muslims do, and I know that they're.
Well, the Quran seems to say that. Maybe the Mass Arab.
No, we have this concept of looking for the truth. So there's the famous, the famous hadith. Maybe Master Arab can comment on this, but the famous hadith where there was a man who was, killed 99 people. And he felt bad and he wanted to look for remorse, and he was looking for God, and he went to a priest and he asked him, and he goes, well, can I get repentance? Will God forgive me? The guy said no, the priest. So he killed the priest. He still found remorse and he still was looking for God, and on his way he started going for a journey to look for God, and he was looking for someone else, and he died on the way, and God forgave him. So
after
it's
killing 9 people.
Can I ask one question?
It's about looking for truth.
I know, Saracen, but come on. I mean, that hadith, you're believing in this hadith. You're saying this is basically from one of Bukhari or Muslim, which you said you don't really take that credibly, but now you do because it's.
No, I'm not saying I dismiss Bukhari or Muslim, but what I'm saying is that there is, because I do think that they've done some excellent work. But what I'm saying is, if it goes in line with my principles in the Hanafi.
Okay. Let me just ask you a quick question then.
Yeah.
I'm going to need to go pretty soon anyway, but I'll ask a question. So basically, do you believe that people should potentially be punished in an afterlife for believing or not believing something? Or should it be purely on people's actions?
I think, look, everyone is going to be judged according to their own capacity. This is my understanding, that Allah's given us brains, and some people have been through really bad experiences, and other people have been given. But I think what we mustn't do is close our minds. And this applies to Muslims, Jews, Christians, and atheists. And sometimes even the atheists, they become so arrogant. Oh, look at these backward Muslims. Oh, they haven't got anything. Maybe try to listen to our conversation. Maybe try to listen to what we're coming out with. It could be that I'm talking absolute nonsense, but at least go and research what I've said. Similarly with Muslims, I say listen to what the atheists say.
Okay, but hang on a second. You do sort of wander a little bit off the topic. The question was quite clear on, do you think that people should be punished in hell for what they believe or not believe, or is it purely on their actions? So we can come back to that question when the Master Arab leaves, but I want to make sure that his question is answered before he goes, if you will.
I think if your belief is you should torture people and you should hurt people and you should just walk over people, I think there should be some represent. So, for example, Jimmy Savile, absolutely, someone like him, I think he should have his represent.
But that's not, Jimmy Savile is a bad example to bring up, because Jimmy Savile actually did do damage. So he would be potentially punished for his actions.
Yes, those people, yes, I believe they should be punished.
Yeah. So are you saying that you don't agree with the Quran when it talks about punishing non-believers?
So this is the thing. What we sometimes see as non-believers, this is where, and we have been on the show many times and I've discussed this. What is the kuffar? What does kuffar mean? Is it a universal term, or is it specific to a certain type of people?
It's a bit of a straightforward question, Sam.
No, but it's not though. That's the thing. When we say unbelievers, when you say
about kuffar.
Yeah, go on, please explain to me what the kuffar is. You'd have to define it for me.
What is it? Go on,
so
tell me what the kuffar is.
This is what I'm saying. I know you've got to go. We'd have really. You've got to come back, man.
I think because Saracen, I think you're a nice guy in that sense, and I just observe that you're not able to give a concise answer to something.
No, because no. What I'm saying, you're probably right, Rob. Because with the kuffar thing, a lot of people say, "Oh, kuffar are going." You have to define what kuffar is. You have to define.
So then again, we're complicating the religion once more, aren't we? Even the term kuffar now requires a thesis and but
this is what God's given us a brain. Why not look into it? Rather than dismiss it, why not look into it?
That's perfect. If God has given us a brain, then why are we punished for concluding that He doesn't exist in our brain?
We wouldn't be. This is the thing. If we believed, this is what Imam Ghazali and loads of many of us go. If we generally came to the conclusion Islam was presented in a distorted way, or you went and you asked questions and the mullah or whoever misled you and you couldn't answer your questions or blah blah, or misled you and told you, gave you this perverse reason. Many people say that you'll have your own kind of reckoning. You wouldn't necessarily be punished.
Okay, so wouldn't necessarily be punished, but probably would, or maybe would. But carry on to that. If we're not punished, what's the point of hell? Because ultimately, what you're saying is, if somebody hasn't been exposed to true Islam, that has managed to convince him 100%, then ultimately, there's nobody going to hell, because anybody who didn't believe in Islam never really had good enough evidence. Who in their right mind would believe that Islam is true, yet choose to reject it, knowing fully well that they're going to spend an eternity in hellfire?
Well, there's people like Abu Lahab and there's this Pharaoh, for example, that's mentioned in the Quran. What the Quran is really against is arrogance.
Yeah,
the arrogance. The arrogance where you're not willing to look at another person's kind of viewpoint. And this is why I do listen to you, and this is why, I come on this show. You can ask them. I come on it quite regularly. Well, I used to, and anyway, I've been busy recently. But I try to listen to people's opinions rather than just talk over them.
It's definitely good, Saracen. Listening to other people is always good. And I'm not suggesting that you should start talking over people. And obviously, I really appreciate you coming on, and your approach is very friendly, and you're very civil in your discussion.
Thank you.
So that's something that's reflecting positively on you and positively on whatever you believe as well, potentially for some people. I don't think it really does. I think it just means that you're the person. And I think maybe we can differ on other things.
Yeah.
But at least we can have a conversation.
I mean, to be honest with you, I haven't really come. I know some people are saying but I haven't really come to be. I've come to more have a interaction with you, have a discussion with you, because I'm trying to understand where you came from, your position is, and what kind of drives you. Because I find you really interesting and really intriguing, to be honest with you. And some of the stuff I completely in many ways, I completely understand why people would leave Islam, to be honest with you, in the sense that there's so much information out there, and there's so many people presenting in a way. And but I would say to people, look a bit deeper. You have to look at social context. You have to look at the classical kind of Arabic. You have to look at what words mean. You have to look at idiosyncrasies. There's a lot.
I have a question for you, Saracen. Basically, what you're saying, in a nutshell, what you're saying is, don't take stuff that's on the surface. I mean, basically, if you're looking at hadith, if you're looking at a Quranic verse, never just be content with what you see on the piece of paper, what's written there. Look deeper, study, immerse yourself, go into the background, all this stuff. My problem with that is, not that I don't do it myself. I think if you watch my videos, you'll know that I do that times.
Absolutely.
I do that for myself, but not because I'm, it's because I'm formulating an argument. It's because I'm trying to look deeper into the meaning, trying to understand the origin of it. Not because I think it's God's word that I'm looking deeper.
Sure.
The problem I have here is you can't do that with every religion, right? You can't do that with every religion. So, for example, if you're a Muslim, you're getting doubts, and you're saying, no, hang on a second. You need to spend at least 10 years here. You need to spend 10 years. Look deeper into every verse. Look deeper into this. You can't do that if there are so many religions across the world. How can you eventually find the right religion if every religion requires you to look into much depth into that religion? It just becomes an implausible request.
But then let's say you don't. What happens if you don't? That question is valid if you believe that you're going to go hellfire if you don't find the right religion. I don't necessarily believe that. So.
Well, I mean, yeah, but you're kind of going against pretty much most Muslims here, right? I mean,
No, because there's obviously verses in the Quran that talk about.
I'm not saying you and Mufti Abu Layth. I'm saying the majority of Muslims aren't going to agree with you.
No, because Sheikh Hamza Yusuf says something. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, who's one of he's one of the big scholars in Islam in the modern time. He actually says that within the Bible, so the Bible and the Injil, we call the Bible now, God preserves people through their religion. There's truth in each of those books, and he believes that because of that mercy, that's what they're hanging on to. Then that's merciful. Now, if someone hasn't been exposed to any other religion and they just believe in their religion, if we believe that it's from God, because remember, we believe the Quran is just a continuation of the previous scriptures. If that's what they got, that's why I don't have, I respect Christians and Jews and those religions as well. Obviously, I disagree with them on certain points, but if they're looking, for me, the key thing in life is to look for the truth.
Can I just interject very slightly? What points do you disagree with them on?
Well, in the Bible,
Yeah,
I do. To be honest with you, I'm not an expert on the Bible, but from what I've read, I do, and I've watched a number of documentaries. I do believe that it has been altered. I do believe that I've read a bit of Ehrman's books and stuff like that. I know I've spoken to quite a few Christians, and they haven't been able to answer me sufficiently. And I believe that there was a number of gospels out there. So, you know, I could be mistaken. Maybe Christianity is right. Who knows? But as far as I know...
No, but what I'm trying to get at here, Saracen, is basically a Muslim will usually say, hey, you know what, I've got my differences with the Bible. And usually you'll get, oh, well, I don't believe in the Holy Trinity. I believe that God is one, right? But then is it just convenient that every single Muslim has come to that conclusion that, oh, well, you know, I don't believe that because they say three gods or whatever it is. It's confusing me. It's not making sense. To you as a Muslim, is it actually you, Saracen, that's thinking this way? Or is it the Muslim in you? Is it basically the Islamic faith and what it's told you already? You're coming with a preconceived notion of what's true. And it's the one God hypothesis. And you're saying, well, I can't believe that because there's more than one God here. And it's just the same way as Muslims would dismiss Hinduism. They'll do it immediately because they think, oh, polytheistic, that doesn't make sense. But even then, I'm thinking to myself, as an atheist who doesn't believe in any God, I think to myself, well, hang on a second, why are you so dismissive of polytheism? I was like that as a Muslim. And when I left Islam, if you go back to my first video, you can probably see me say that. I would say, oh, you know, I think I have a line in there where I say, out of all the religions, I think Islam still makes the most sense. I don't think that anymore because now I've kind of fully come out of the bubble. I think I was still somewhat in a bubble where I thought it was more reasonable just because I'd grown up in it and I'd normalized everything. To me, everything became normal. Yeah, of course it makes sense that there's one God. Of course it makes sense that there's an afterlife. Of course it makes sense there's angels with wings. It doesn't make sense. Why should any of this make sense?
Saracen, let me quickly ask you a question, which maybe the Masked Arab will appreciate. If this is a hypothetical question, if Muhammad did marry a 6-year-old girl, what would the consequences be for you?
To be honest with you, Stops, I thought of it. I can't rationalize that he would do that. To be honest, I've looked at all the evidences, and for me, it was a bit of a shock.
No. It's not about evidences.
It's a hypothetical.
Hypothetical. You put me on the spot now. I haven't really thought of it.
That's my point. That's what I do. That's what I do.
I'd still believe he's the Prophet, because from what I've read a lot of his biographies, not for and against, I'd still believe he's the Prophet, of course.
But how would you then rationalize that part?
How would I
rationalize? Yeah. How would you rationalize it? I mean, obviously, I've heard Muslims say, "Hey, he needed to do this to kind of strengthen the bonds, even though it was his best friend."
It's very difficult for me to answer that question in the sense that because I've read so many of these the sources. I've read so many. I've read whole theses on this from for and against, and about the age of the time, about how it has affected Muslim culture, and of course, no doubt it has affected Muslim culture, and that's something I seek to change. But yeah, for me, it's very hard because of all the knowledge that I have on this. I can't imagine that he ever did marry such a young girl. I do believe that the nikah might have happened at a younger age, but then that's a whole process.
What if
marriage
he did?
It stops. I can't answer that because I'm being honest.
You could answer, didn't you? You said that you would still consider him a prophet.
Yeah,
right?
I'd consider
so there would be no consequence.
No.
Interesting.
Wait a second.
Okay, Masked Arab, is there any question that you would like to ask anyone, or something that you would like to point out?
Yeah, nothing's coming to mind. I don't know.
What is your stance on sex slaves?
Is that a question in the chat or something? Or?
No, it was actually a question to Saracen, but I thought maybe you'd like to ask it.
Okay.
Because I know Saracen is not going to answer it.
Let Master go, and he's only got 10 minutes, man. Then we'll talk about sex slaves when he goes. Don't worry.
No, let's hear about sex slaves. I mean, do you believe that sex slaves is a thing? That'd be interesting to know.
I mean, to be honest with you, I really.
Is it one of those where you think it's? Is it one of those where you think it belongs in the 7th century?
I don't believe. I contextualize the society, so I very much try to view the Quran, the way that the hyperbole of the Prophet in some of the hadiths, the kind of history. I try to put myself in that 7th century and try to see what was going on there. Now, unfortunately, there's a lots of stuff. For example, there was a convention amongst Arabs, and that if you could get to a tent, the white tent before, women would be on the battlefield. If they could run, they wouldn't be taken as slaves. Or if they went to certain people's houses, they wouldn't be taken as slaves. But then not all of them made it, so they were slaves, absolutely. But it's hard to explain it because you have to kind of imagine yourself. I think the best thing I would say to people is watch the Vikings, which or if you get Amazon Prime, probably the best TV show out there, and it's a very similar sort of macho culture. So, women there would be women that are slaves, and they'll just give themselves up to men because that was what they did at the time. So, I think it is somewhat.
The Quran is still here today.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. This is what I said. I don't believe that things stay static. So, for example, slavery is abolished, and would never want that to come back again. And that's why I'm really against this whole kind of. I'm for trajectory hermeneutics.
Super.
You go forward. Yeah.
That means we can ignore parts of the Quran. Brilliant. I'm all for that.
No, it's not about ignoring. This is the question that I was discussing with
kind of
Arab earlier.
Kind of is.
Yeah, no, because the laws, or what's in the Quran. So, for example, it says in the Quran, get ready with your horses. Now, no one believes, no Muslim will say to you nowadays that we use horses in a battlefield. No, we use modern technology, tanks, etc. And similarly, the Quran we believe is divine and the word of God. But are the laws, do they remain static in the 7th century? I don't believe.
Yeah, but there's no law saying that. Sorry, Saracen, it's a bad example because there's no law stating that you can only attack your enemy with horses.
No, but what I'm saying is that it says in the Quran. So that's actually a command in one of the.
That's a command for the people at the time. That's fine. But then when we look at, let's say, for example, fornication, and we have 100 lashes. Are you saying that now we can disregard that?
Or yes, absolutely, you can disregard that. Yeah.
If you say we can disregard it, at what year do you think that should have been disregarded?
I think
when should they be working with that, and then when they disregard it, is it completely ignored? Is there no punishment for fornication, or is there something like does it become like a does it become a jail time? What happens?
You're dealing with a Hanafi here, firstly, so it's discretionary. Anyway. But anyway, I know it's out there in the other ones, but. According to Sayyidina Umar, for example, in the time of drought, he suspended all of these punishments. Now, if it was divine, or if it had to be all times, all places, why did that happen? So maybe that's a better example. And from that, this is what Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayah, who I think is one of the leading scholars, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf's teacher, he says that, in these times, you substitute them. And this isn't just
can you just be clear, Saracen, are you saying that every single Sharia had punishment was suspended? Or are we talking solely about that?
Well, no, we're talking about death penalty. We're talking about, for example, the two witnesses. For example, the women two witnesses. He said that you don't need that. This is Sayyidina Umar. There's many other things. I believe that lashings. I'm not 100% sure about the lashings though. But that was suspended. The cutting off the thief was definitely suspended because it was a time of drought. He suspended that. So this is an early.
Who's he? Is this Omar again?
Umar bin Khattab.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And does he have the authority to suspend this?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And this is what we say. Yeah, this is what we say.
Okay.
This is what we say. That if you take the Quran just literally in its complete literal form, and anyone can just pick and choose. This is why you get ISIS Islam. That's why.
What you're
qualified scholarship.
That's fine, but what you're telling us now is Islam is similar to Catholicism, in terms of the Pope being able to basically overrule some of the contents of the Bible, you know. So that's what we're getting with the Quran. If any caliph can come along and say, hang on a second, I think we should suspend this, and they indefinitely, let's suspend this indefinitely. Who's to say that person should have more authority than the word of God?
But it's not just the caliph. This is what we're saying. It's not just the caliph. We believe it's
that's what Umar ibn Khattab was at the time.
He was absolutely caliph, but he was also.
But how can you make it unified?
But he was also a judge. He used to give fatwas as well.
Okay.
So
okay. But how would you make that universal across the Islamic State? If some scholars saying this, another scholar saying this, another mufti saying this, it has to come from a central figure, doesn't it? So it can be universally rejected.
No, but this is what I'm saying. There's many different opinions out there. You probably agree with this. You know that there's many different opinions. This is what I'm saying. I don't believe that there's a one size fit all Islam. I believe time, space, where you are, your culture, and in our madhab, in our school of thought, the culture of the people has a big effect on people. So, you know, we believe that that has to be considered.
So what guidance is valid?
So we go to our valid scholars who have qualified.
Who decides?
The society. Well, each layperson, they follow a school of thought. That's traditionally how it is.
No, they read the Quran. They listen to the Imam, and that's it. Most don't even read the Quran.
This is where you're wrong. You're right. Modern day people, but traditionally, people would follow a school of thought. These are very recent things.
Yeah, that's okay, Saracen. But what if I was a scholar, and somebody would come to me and say, what's your opinion on, I don't know, raping? Or no, actually, rape. That's a bad example because raping isn't specifically prevented in the Quran. Let's say something else. What's your opinion on murder? And I said to them, you know what? I think it's right. Murdering a Muslim, by the way, I'm talking specifically murdering a Muslim. Because that's specifically prohibited in the Quran. Murdering in general isn't necessarily mentioned. So murdering a Muslim, somebody comes to me and says, is murdering a Muslim okay? And I say, you know what? Yeah, I think it is. I think it was prevented during the 7th century for that time and place, but I think we're fine murdering Muslims now. Would anybody take me seriously? Would I still be giving away Islam? Would I still be teaching Islam?
Well, this is the thing. It's probably a bad example. I've never yet met any proper scholar of who follows the madhab that would actually ever justify that, because of course that would go against the clear principles within the Quran. So but
then again, there's other clear principles in the Quran that you're happy to do away with. So, for example, the punishment there is, adultery, fornication must be punished. That's in the Quran. But you're happy to get rid of that.
That's not principle. No. The principles are different to the law. This is the thing. So the principle.
But that's also a law, isn't it? When I'm saying killing a Muslim is banned.
Killing anyone. It says you will always have wiggle with your laws unless you kill an innocent human being. Forget whether it's a Muslim.
I'm saying specifically. I'm saying specific because the Quran specifies you can't kill a Muslim. It doesn't specify you can't kill random people or kuffar or whatever, because it does tell you sometimes to fight them, right, and kill them. But it tells you about killing a Muslim, متعمدا, deliberately, not by error.
Yeah.
So I mean, who's to decide that the person saying no more lashing is more correct than the person saying, you know what, it should be fine. Homosexual relationship, whatever.
Answer your question directly. This is where you need the qualified scholarship, and this is why we say.
Who makes them qualified?
No, this is what I'm saying. So you need an ijaza. So we know that the way Islam has always been transmitted through the madhab system is that someone who is qualified, they will assess you in all the many different sciences, check your character, everything, and then if you are given permission, then you're allowed to teach. And you're allowed to give fatwa.
Saracen, you're going round in circles.
Okay,
TMZ has just told you exactly this. he were a scholar and would tell you that. Now you're saying, well, then we need a scholar.
No, but you can't.
We're going full circles here.
How can you? How can you when there isn't? It's like saying, oh, what if a scholar says, you know, adultery is okay on the public highway? You know, it's nonsensical.
Okay, how do you decide? This is exactly the question. How do you decide on what authority?
And I've just explained to you, and I've explained.
No, you haven't. You've been mumbling and grumbling, but you haven't said anything.
No. I haven't explained. I've been very clear. We've had a madhab system. Within the madhab system, you have a qualified scholarship. So you have people who have a chain that goes back, and they need to have ijazah. This is why we don't open it up. We're not Salafis here.
Yeah, but who gives them ijazah?
The qualified scholar before them.
Okay, so then it's a kind of it's hereditary, isn't it? So what we're going to get,
chain down.
It's basically it's going to be similar to what we have, for example, in Iran with the supreme leader. You know, the supreme leader isn't going to let the next person down the line be the supreme leader if he doesn't feel that he reflects his own values and opinions. So you're going to be stuck in a bit of a circle, which isn't really.
We won't be. I tell you why we won't be, because what you have. So you have for example, let's just use the 5 madhabs. So even with the Jafri school. Yeah. So you have within them. You absolutely right. There's some people that would be stuck. And laws won't change, and because it will just be a law after law, and the person who will often just give ijazah to people who think like them. You're absolutely right there. But traditionally, that's never been the case. We've always had scholars after scholars after scholars who have been given.
You said something interesting. Can I just interject very quickly? Sorry about that.
Go for it. Yeah.
But you said something interesting, saying basically, once they come up with their ruling of changing something, other scholars have to kind of agree with it, right? Other scholars have to kind of okay it.
Not necessarily. No, not necessarily.
So one person can do it on their own.
So if a person becomes, for example, this is where you have the mujtahids. So within the scholars, there's levels of scholarship. So you have people who are absolutely able to make their own kind of independent reasoning. So what we call mujtahid mutlaq. There's levels of that. So these people have a certain kind of authority higher than others.
That's fine, Saracen, but these mujtahids can't go against the Jama'ah, right?
They can't go against
the mujtahid can't say. Okay, fine, but the mujtahid won't be taken credibly. The mujtahid won't be taken credibly if he says that hellfire is not a real thing. It's an allegorical phrase in the Quran. It's not actually a real punishment. Something like that. Or somebody says there is no judgment day. Nothing happens after you die.
Yeah.
I mean, can they say that?
There are some Muslim scholars that have questioned the notion of hell and heaven. We're talking quite senior people. They've been dismissed absolutely, but then other people have followed them. But generally, no, their judgment is absolutely. It's one of the articles of faith. You know, so you of course you have to believe that. But yeah, this is. Sorry, what was your question?
That was my. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Now the question is, who decides at the end of the day who's right? Because you've got all these scholars over the last 1,000 years who have decided, yes, what is in Bukhari and Muslim is Sahih. In other words, it is authentic, and it says there that Aisha was 6 when she got married and 9 when she had sex. Now you decide, well, now it's the 21st century. We don't like this anymore. And now you're changing it. You're saying all the old scholars were right. Now let's take the new scholars, and the old scholars are wrong. The new scholars are right because I want it to be that way. Who decides now who is right?
Actually, there was a number of scholars that questioned that narration from very early on, but generally people wouldn't even look into ages. They wouldn't really look into the hadith of the early part of what happened in the creation.
Show me an old scholar who questioned the age of Aisha.
I've got it written down actually in something I'm preparing, and we'll have that discussion another day. But your point is back.
Okay, give me the name. Okay, you've got it written down. Then give me the name who questioned the age of Aisha being 6 when she got married and 9 when the marriage was consummated.
Stop. I said we'll discuss it another time because I'm trying to stick to the topic here.
Okay, so it seems every time I put a direct question, you sidestep and run away.
No, it's not that. I want to give you the correct.
Yeah, but you're doing the same thing now with the Moss Arab. As soon as you ask you a direct question, you start waffling.
I'm not waffling. I'm trying to answer his question. You keep interrupting. Don't worry, Master. Me and him, we have these sort of discussions all the time. It's not
It's all right.
anyway. So yeah, basically, so what Stops was asking is, where does the central authority lie? So we say it lies within the madhabs. There's so many plethora of views. We don't see that as a negative thing. We see that as a positive thing. The problem that we are fighting now is that people that say Islam is only one thing. This is haram. This is halal. There's no in betweens. You know, we have a whole category of things. You know, from what is wajib to what is, you know, permissible to what is makruh, you know, what is disliked to what is haram. So, and many scholars have differed over the time. So it's perfectly, you know, we can use those opinions. We can use, because they come from within our tradition. I think that's the strength of Islam. And I think that's what, you know, we try to bring back.
Saracen, how representative do you think views like yourselves, you know, views like yours are in the general Islamic world?
I think I come from obviously within the tradition, and I think that we are becoming, I think our kind of voice has not been heard for a long time. And I think that's probably why the mess is being, but people like Sheikh bin Bayya, like I mentioned, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, Mufti Abu Layth, Sheikh Atabek, Shakrov, many of these great scholars, we're speaking out now. The problem is we are
I don't know if they're great scholars. I mean, you know, most of them I hadn't heard of. Not necessarily because they are great scholars. I'm not saying just because I haven't heard of them, they're not great scholars. They could be.
No,
but you know, but the thing is, I think you might be overblowing it a bit in terms of these people being great scholars and they're all saying something similar. I think if we're looking at the Islamic world as a whole, I don't think. I mean, I'm not trying to belittle what you're trying to achieve. No. I mean, I think what you're trying to achieve is going in the right direction a bit. You know, yeah. I think personally it involves a lot of mental gymnastics, but at the end of the day, I think you will be somebody who is not a threat to me on the street, whereas somebody else will be. You know, you'll be somebody who I can have a conversation with without right. it, you know, becoming uncivil.
The Master Arab, thank you so much again for coming on as a guest and staying way longer than you said.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure.
We're very appreciative. It's been valuable to the viewers, valuable to me. I'm going to go rewatch the beginning that I missed, and we'll carry on for a short while afterwards. But I would want to thank you again. The invitation, as Stops has said, is always open. I appreciate you're very busy. So if at some point you feel like you're available on a Friday, do let me know, and we'll move anything around. Unless I've got a special guest on, we'll move something around to get you on again. So huge thanks for myself, and I'm sure from Stops and Saracen as well.
Thank you to you guys, and thanks as well.
Absolutely.
Nice talking to you. Take care, mate.
Good night. Thank you.
Thanks.